Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to EAStalk webinar. My name is Anna Viskovic, and I'm Project and Program Manager at the European Aquaculture Society. I will be moderating this session today. Thank you for joining us for the Springer Nature Author Workshop with our speaker, Judith Terpos. Before we begin, a quick note of appreciation. Springer Nature sponsored the EAS Awards at the Aquaculture Europe Conference, and will do so again at the Aquaculture Europe 2025 in Valencia this September. And thank you very much for your continued support of excellence in our community. Today's session will run for 45 minutes, and Judith will speak for about 30 minutes, followed by a live Q&A of around 15 minutes. The webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available on the EAS YouTube channel for 1 month, then accessible to EAS members on our website under the EAStalk webinars. You can ask your questions in the chat at any time. Please keep your questions focused and brief, and you can include your name and affiliation if you wish. What you can expect today. Publishing can feel complex, and this workshop will walk through the full journey, preparing a strong manuscript, choosing a journal, understanding publishing models, navigating submission and peer review, and how to promote your work after acceptance. You will also learn practical ways to spot trustworthy journals. This content is particularly useful for students and early career researchers, and it also offers a good refresh for experienced authors. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Judith Terpos. Judith is an associate publisher in life science journals at Springer Nature with nearly 25 years of experience. She managed a portfolio in aquatic environmental sciences and works closely with editors and research communities on journal development and publishing strategy. Judith, thank you so much for being with us. The floor is yours, and you can start with the presentation.
Thank you, Anna, very much for the nice introduction. Welcome, everyone, and thank you to the Springer and welcome to the Springer Nature Author Workshop. So today we're going to have a look at the topics that you see here on the right. First, we're going to have a look at the introduction to Springer Nature, then followed by the logical manuscript structure, which will help you write your paper. Next, the efficient publishing strategy, for example, how to choose the right and trustworthy journey. Manuscript journey from submission, such as a cover letter, the review process, the decision, and the promotion of your work. And there are also a few slides with additional information, with useful resources, tutorials, free webinars, and frequently asked questions. First, however, let's have a look at what the aim of this workshop is. So apart from being an author, you also want to be an effective communicator. You do not just want to be published. You also want to be widely read. You want your papers to impact and influence the advancement of your field. If it does, it will be cited more, and you will build your reputation worldwide. You will establish new international collaborations. All of this will help you advance your career. So these are the subjects that we are going to look at for the author workshop today. Before we do so, let's start and have a quick look at the introduction of Springer Nature. Springer Nature is a global research publisher. Here on the left, you can see the main imprints which are under the umbrella of Springer Nature, such as Springer, Nature, BMC, Scientific American, Macmillan, and so on. Springer Nature continuously grows its open access portfolio across all journals and disciplines. We now have about 600 journals. I specifically would like to emphasize the last item on this slide, which talks about TAs. TA is an abbreviation and it means transformative agreement. They are actually contracts that combine a subscription access to Springer Nature journals with funding for authors to publish their article open access. This means that if authors submit to a subscription journal, they have the choice to publish their article open access. This is called the Springer Nature Open Choice Model, and we now have around 1,700 journals that offer this. Let me give you an example. If you, as an author, submit your article to this subscription journal, you can check via this button, Explore Open Access Funding, if you are eligible for open access. So this button is now available on the home pages of all non-open access journals. The last slide about Springer Nature shows that it does not only publish journals and books, but also other products such as handbooks, reference works, nature reference works, databases, reviews, theses, and more. Let's start with the logical manuscript structure. The readers that you want to reach with your paper, they will mostly have 4 important questions. Why did you do the study? What did you do, or how did you do it? What did you find? How does it advance the field? So the focus and structure of your manuscript should answer those 4 questions, which is the so-called IMRAD structure, which you are probably all familiar with. Let's have a look at the introduction. The upside-down pyramid symbolizes that it is best to start the introduction very broad and then narrow it down so that you guide your readers to your specific topic. It attracts the interest of the broader audience about your research, and it will help you have a broader impact. If it is for a global audience, you can introduce the topic from an international perspective. Make sure, however, to keep the terminology broad, because they may not be familiar with the specific terminology in your field. You can also introduce your topic from a regional perspective. Let's have a look at what is known. What is known is all about the literature review. It shows how familiar you are, what has been published in the field, and it demonstrates your expertise. And when readers see that see your expertise, they will have a greater confidence and trust. And this again is very important for peer review. What is not known is all about the gaps, which is very important to highlight. This is the motivation as to why research needs to be done. Because when you have identified a research problem, it leads to the specific aims of the paper. And that aim should be trying to answer or solve the problem that you have highlighted, which is important for the field. That brings us to the methodology. This emphasizes what authors have done. It helps researchers because they may want to replicate or reproduce these methods. It helps them to believe that they can trust the findings that they want to build upon. It is also very important for reviewers. They will evaluate this section very carefully to see if they can find flaws in the methods or technique used. And if the conclusion cannot be properly supported, it can lead to major revision or even rejection. So transparency and thoroughness are really very important. And a few days ago, I received an email from an editor, and I have included a slide because I thought that this would be a very nice example. This editor was reviewing a paper, and the editor said, many of the system-focused submissions in my area have major problems with replicates and experimental design that completely undermine the statistical validity of the work. The number of replicates are not clearly stated in the methods. So this resulted in a back and forth emails between the editor and the author, and this not only delayed the work for the caused extra work for the editor, but it also delayed the review process. What do your readers need to know? They need to know who or what was being used in the experiments, how the research was done, which techniques were used and under what conditions, but also how you analyzed it. If you are unfamiliar with analysis, it is very important and strongly advised to ask an expert who knows something about statistics, because statistical errors are a common problem that reviewers identify when they evaluate a paper. So after you have highlighted what you did, you now need to highlight what you found. And this particular order listed here, initial observation, characterization, and application, may not be how you found the results, but it is more logical for readers who are not yet known what the study is. In the initial observation, try to attract the interest about what you have tried to find. Then try to expand on this and go into more detail about how this observation will be useful in the field. And continue to try to explain why this is going to be useful and applicable. How can a field benefit from this? How can a field build upon this? And it's always good to give an example. Let's have a look at the results. It is advised not to overwhelm the readers with complex information, but to present it bit by bit, one figure and one table at a time. And it's also suggested to use short paragraphs simply because it's easier for the readers. So in the general structure of the results, first introduce the readers what they are looking for. Here is figure X, here is table Y. Then talk about the important trends and relationships that the figure and the table has. Then say why this figure or table is important and what the takeaway message is. It helps readers to remember what the most important information is when they try to remember your study. This is not the interpretation. The interpretation is meant for the discussion part, where the author's opinion is written about those data. That brings us to the discussion part. As you can see from the pyramid, it is the opposite from the introduction. Remember, in the introduction, it is important to start broad, to catch the interest of the public. In the discussion, highlight the specific study and how this is going to be of interest to that broad audience that you captured. Therefore, it is important to identify your audience. The beginning of the discussion lists a summary of what you did, and you can highlight the research problem again. Most of the discussion is in the interpretation. Here are the findings. Here is what I think they mean and why I think it is going to be valuable for the field. Note that readers and peer reviewers are specifically concerned whether there is additional value for the field. Always highlight unexpected or negative results, and also highlight any limitations of the study and the impact those limitations have on the validity of the study overall. In the main conclusion, you inform the readers what the main conclusion is, which can hopefully solve the important problem in the field, and also explain how a reader can put this information into practice. On this slide, there is a recap of the logical structure of the main text that we just talked about. So this is a handy slide that you can keep and look at for the order that you need to follow. Let's have a look at titles. The title is very important for your manuscript because readers looking for the latest articles go online to search engines and they see lists and lists of articles, so your title needs to grab their attention. The title should always emphasize what is valuable or important about the study. It helps to use active verbs. Try not to be too vague and use correct grammar and keywords from the research. Try not to use too long titles and try not to use proceedings of or abbreviations or exclamation marks. And try to avoid questions because they can only confuse the reader. So a nice strategy to write an effective title is to emphasize what was important, is to state what was being investigated. For example, a key outcome. As equally important as the title is, of course, also the abstract. It's the first thing which is read. There are too many papers and there's not enough time, so many researchers simply only read the abstract to stay up to date. In your abstract, you state what is actually not known in the field that needs to be addressed. Then add some lines to broadly summarize the aims and the methodology, but not in detail. Most of the text of the abstract should be focused on the key findings. And in the end, state some line on the conclusion that hopefully solves the key problem, giving important implications, recommendations, or applications for the field. It is the application aspect that would draw the attention of the reader who may think, this is something that could be applicable to me. Let's have a look at the efficient publishing strategy. The main goal of all authors is to publish fast and have impact. But we always like to say to authors that impact does not always mean and is not the same as impact factor. Springer Nature, as many other publishers, is a signatory of DORA. DORA stands for Declaration on Research Assessment. And in principle, it means to evaluate an article. It encourages to take a broad spectrum of metrics into account and not only the impact factor. So it's the impact that research is having with a particular audience. Talking about audience, this is really the key factor. You as the author should remember who that audience is so that you can define which journal is appropriate to submit your article to. Do you want to reach researchers in your region or worldwide? In your own subject area or related areas? Is it meant for academics, for policymakers, for the general public? These aspects should all be taken into account. How does that audience fit in with the selection strategy of the journal? If you know which audience you want to reach, you choose either an international or a regional journal. Note that regional journals are there for a good reason. They help to direct the author's ideas to that local readership, where they are likely to have the maximum impact and influence. Regarding the accessibility, most academics have access to the full contents of the subscription journals via the university libraries or institutions. But there are a lot of regions where funding is an issue and where they do not have access to subscription journals. If you choose open access journals to submit your article to, we often get the question, which open access journals can we trust? And how do we know if the open access journal that we chose is not a predatory journal. So here are 4 recommendations. Have you heard of the publisher before? Is it indexed in reputable databases such as Web of Science? Please note that journals have to apply to be included in these databases and that the criteria to get included are very strict. Does the processing fee or the APC need to be paid after acceptance? There are some exceptions where journals ask for the submission fee before, but most journals ask for the APC after acceptance. Check out the board. Do you recognize some of them? If you don't, this should raise some red flags. There is a freely accessible database called Think, Check, Submit, and I've included the link on this slide. It has a useful checklist to identify trustworthy journals. If you would like to choose a Springer Nature journal to submit your article to, at Springer Nature you can use the Springer Nature Journal Finder. You can plot in your abstract and keywords, and it gives you recommendations of the journals that would fit where your article would fit. So now that we've talked about how to logically organize your paper and how to choose the right journal, you are ready to submit. And this brings us to the last section about the successful journal submission. When you submit an article to a journal, you have to realize that the editors-in-chief of most journals are also full-time professors. They have limited time. And when they review manuscripts, they often do that in weekends or in the evenings. Besides that, you're also competing with other researchers. So how do we attract the attention of the editor-in-chief of the journal? The best attention is to write an effective cover letter. A letter that emphasizes quickly and officially what the importance is of your work, how it is relevant, and for whom. Why is this important? It helps the editors-in-chief to decide whether your paper is suitable for the readership of their journal, because the editors, they have a responsibility to the readers of the journal to publish research that is going to help support the research community. And a nice structure of a cover letter is to first introduce the manuscript and the type of paper. Is it an original research? Is it a review article? Then emphasize the scope of your study, because being out of scope is a very common reason for editors-in-chief to immediately desk reject a paper or to send it to the transfer desk, and I will talk about it a bit later. So it is important to read the aims and scope of a journal before you submit to it. Another very important aspect to keep in mind is novelty, because that is what the editor-in-chief will be looking for as well. That is identified by the research problem and the aims and scope to address this. Next is to highlight the achievements. What have you done, and are the accomplishments appropriate for the journal? The editors-in-chief want to know if your findings have already been published in their journal. So highlight your study design and summarize 2 or 3 of the most important key findings. Make sure that you are familiar with what the journal is looking for. Again, check the aims and scope and recent published articles. For example, if it's an applied journal, the editors-in-chief are interested in the applications of the key findings. And finally, add any additional information which is required by the journal, such as ethical statements. And what is required for each journal can be found in the author guidelines, which are sometimes also called instructions for authors. reading what has been published before you submit is very important, especially when you want to know what has already been published on your own topic. If you have chosen a Springer Nature journal, you can check this via a Springer link. I've included the link here. You can set filters to look for recent publications, for example, in aquaculture, as in this example. This can give you an idea to identify what is different and unique from your study. And this can help the editor-in-chief determine if your study is positively contributing to the journal. The Springer Nature journals also have a very handy checklist in the instructions for authors to help you not to forget anything before you submit. Get familiar with the author guidelines. I know it's time-consuming and it's very boring, but in the end, you will be glad that you have read it, especially when it comes to editorial policies. I'd like to specifically emphasize editorial policies because if you are having a research involving animals or biological material, you need to know what is required and what you need to include as additional information. Furthermore, you should also make yourself familiar with the AI policies of the publishers. They may differ per publisher. At Springer Nature, it is not allowed to include AI as an author, nor to use generative AI images. You can use an AI tool to assist you in copy editing to improve your text so that it's free of grammatical errors. But you have to make sure that there is always a human involved with the final version of your work. And note that publishers use advanced tools to detect AI-written manuscripts. This is a nice visual of the journey a manuscript makes when it is submitted. Now that we have come to where the editor is interested in your paper, it will now be sent out for peer review. And peer reviewers are like the gatekeepers who ensure the paper is going to be relevant. As specific experts, the editor-in-chief expects to receive detailed insights from these peer reviewers. Is it relevant? Is it novel? What needs to be done to further improve its credibility? And this cartoon is just an amusing type of way to introduce peer review to authors, and it's often used in presentations. Of course, we think that most authors understand that peer review has a positive influence on their paper. Peer review helps to make sure that only the most relevant studies are getting published and support and benefit the scientific community. Peer review overall helps to push the field forward. Often peer reviews request major or minor revisions, and they include their concerns and comments, and you as author have to address those concerns and comments, and you do this in a letter. And as an author, you need to first address these in a response letter. So it is advised to include what has been revised, where the revisions can be found, and indicate revisions clearly in your paper, for example, via highlights. And this can help speed up the evaluation of the review. However, what do you do if the reviewer's comments are not fair? We advise to first discuss this with colleagues. Ask your colleagues to look at your paper and the comments from the reviewer to see if the comments are indeed appropriate or not. And if they also do not agree with the reviewer's comments, then we recommend to contact the editor-in-chief. Having that conversation can help, and if they are also in doubt, they may invite an additional peer reviewer. What to do if your paper gets rejected? That happens to many. Now, there are many ways that journals try to support the authors of rejected papers. At Springer, if your article is still sound science, but it doesn't fit the scope of the journal, the editor-in-chief may send your paper to the transfer desk. And the team at the transfer desk finds other journals where the article fits and will send those recommendations to the author. And the author is not obliged to accept them, but can have a choice of other journals where the article may fit. If your article is accepted, it's time to celebrate and to promote it broadly via social media or at conferences where you can talk about your paper face-to-face with other researchers. And another way is to work with your institution or university to discuss if a press release can be done for non-academics to reach an even broader public. For non-open access articles, Springer Nature has shared it. This is a link which is included in each non-open access article and allows people that do not have a subscription to the content of the article to read the paper in full. Note that they cannot download the paper, they cannot print the paper, but they can read the full text. And they can use the link. As an author, you can use the link to promote the article via your own network, via social media. Let me give you an example. Here is an article in a non-open access journal. On the right side, under the About this article information, you can find the Shared It link. And you can share this link with anyone. And you can also put the link in your on your homepage or a shared link via social media. That brings us to the end of the workshop. So to recap, we emphasized the key points about manuscript structure, publication strategies, journal selection, communicating with editors, and the peer review process. There are still a few slides left with additional information, where you can find resources for workshops, tutorials, and frequently asked questions, but I'll leave those for you to read them in your own time. Thank you for listening. I look forward to receiving any questions.
Thank you so much, Judith, for the amazing presentation and for sharing the tips and tricks for our audience. So there is a thing that I did not mention at the beginning of the webinar, but besides the webinar recording, or the EAS members will be able to download directly the slides of the Judith presentation. So you can do it on our EAS website, and as you could see, Judith left the hyperlink, so it would be easier for you to find all the information directly. So now we are opening the Q&A. I would like to encourage you all to start typing the questions that you might be having for Judith, because now is the time to answer them. Judith as well left her email address, so make sure that you write it down. And in case there is something that you might be feeling shy, or it's maybe a little long to ask right now, you can email her later on. I would like to open up the Q&A with one question. What are some of the most common reasons a manuscript gets rejected?
Thank you. The most common reasons that a manuscript is rejected, examples are it's out of scope, or it's too narrow, specifically if a manuscript is submitted to a journal with a broad and international scope, but also if the methods are incorrect, or if there are ethical concerns, integrity concerns. Yes.
Thank you. And why is research data such an important?
Let me have a look. Research data is very important. Hold on. Let me give you an... It is very important to include data availability statements, because if these are not included, then it's not able for researchers to check how methods are being done, how techniques were followed. So it's very important to include the data availability statements where it can be found, to double check and to see if researchers indeed can replicate the study that you did.
Thank you. And what if your data is already published in an article with another publisher? Can Springer Nature still accept the article?
Yes, and you can, if it is properly cited. Look for the source and look what is required to cite the publication, then it is possible, yes.
And do reviewers know who the other reviewers are?
That depends on what the type of review process is for the journal. There are journals that have a double-blind peer review or single-blind peer review or an open peer review policy. Open peer review policy means that the authors know the reviewers know the authors. Double-blind means that the authors do not know the reviewers or vice versa. And the single-blind is that the reviewers are familiar with the authors.
Thank you. I would like to know, how do journals handle the name change? So, for example, after you get married, while preserving citation continuation, let's say like that.
So if I understand correctly, if you submit an article and you have one surname, but after acceptance and after publication, the surname changes.
Yes.
Those changes are not able to be made after publication. The changes that, or the corrections that are made, are usually to do with the content of the article. And if there are aspects in the scientific context that could be misinterpreted and have a direct effect on the scientific content, then corrections can be made or errata can be made.
Thank you, Judith. I would like to encourage more the audience to start asking some questions. So please, now is the time. I do have several questions to be asked, but I also want to include you in this discussion. So please do not be shy and just type any questions that you might be having. I understand that Judith presented quite a amazing presentation, as she explained really well all the aspects, but I hope that you might be having one or two extra questions. Until we receive the next question, I have another one for you, Judith. Is it self-plagiarism if I reuse the text from another publication of mine in the same method is used? And how should I describe the same method in a new paper?
No, it's not actually. You should check the permission in the previous publication and how to cite that. And there is information on Springer Nature if you would like to see more information about how to request for permission. So an example could be like this description of this pilot study and obtained results were previously included in an article, and then include the reference number and repeat it here for the sake of completeness. So if you cite it correctly, then it's not self-plagiarism.
Thank you, Judith. We just received the first question from the audience, and that's coming from Ranesha. What's your idea about preprints?
Preprints. Actually, at Springer Nature, we encourage preprints, and you are allowed to post preprints. That is no problem at all. What would you like to learn more about preprints? Not sure if there are concerns regarding preprints. It is okay
we can wait for Ranesha to write it down.
So at Springer Nature, we use Research Square, and we encourage during submission, you are able as an author to opt in and include your article on a preprint server. After acceptance, then the data is updated. If it's not accepted, then the responsibility lies with the author for the preprint version. It remains the version of the author, the author version.
Thank you, Judith. Until we don't receive any sub-questions from Ranesha, we got another one from Saglain. I have a couple of questions. So the first one is, if one is trying to write down effective paper, which strategy is a correct write abstract before starting writing a paper or after you completed other parts of the paper? So maybe we can start first with the first one.
If I understand the question correctly, should I first start with writing the abstract or first start with all the other parts? It's suggested to first start with all the other parts because in the abstract, it's a short summary and conclusion. So it's suggested to first start with all the other parts of the paper, and then when you finish that, write the abstract at last. Then you have a better idea of what you can include in the abstract.
Thank you, Judith. So the second question from Sakleen is, if a scientist don't get positive or significant probability results, would we have to publish the research and will it affect its impact if he's trying to find a scholarship PhD?
Oh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one that I'm not able to answer, actually. I do know that when you write the paper, when you write a scientific paper, it is very important to also highlight limitations and gaps and negative results to prevent yourself from being biased. So it's very important to highlight those. But for the last part of the question, not able to answer that, I'm sorry.
Thank you. And can you tell us a little bit more how we should report negative or null results in the paper?
The same way as you also report the positive results. It is important to write how it would limit the study, what the limitations are. So there should be a balance. Yes.
Thank you. We can go to another question from Chibuke. For students and early career professionals who are trying to publish their work, are there affordable journals, as a subscription to some journals could be pricey?
The subscription journals are free of charge. If you submit your article to any subscription journal as an author, there are no costs involved. Only if you choose open access. So when you submit your manuscript and you have passed the review process and your article is accepted, you will get a choice for subscription journals. And You can choose to publish your article open access or not. If you prefer to publish your article open access, you should first try and find out if there is funding available via your institution or your university. And you can also check on the journal homepages for funding possibilities. And there are also funding I think on one of the information slides, I have included a frequently asked questions about open access and also where to find funding, and also not fully funding, partly funding and waivers of funding for low-income countries. There's information on that slide as well.
Thank you so much, Judith. Ranesha just sent another question. So regarding the preprints, can we share the preprints even though it's not really finished with peer reviewed?
A preprint, you can share it, but it's not the responsibility of the publisher. So we cannot include preprints, for example, as a reference, because it's not peer reviewed and it's not the final version. It's not the final version that is not yet peer reviewed. As long as it's cited correctly, that it is a preprint and that it can be found in a repository, then you can share it. And it has to be really clearly cited that it is a preprint.
Thank you, Judith, so much. Until we don't receive any more questions, I would like to ask you if you could go a few slides back to your presentation and maybe share with the students about the master classes that Springer is providing, so they can know a little more about what they can get for free.
Yes, this slide shows the classes that Nature is offering. And examples are writing a research paper, publishing a research paper, persuasive grant writing. And there are also live workshops available.
Thank you. In the meantime, we got a question from Risa. Thank you for the inspiring presentation. Which one is the better? First, select a specific journal, then adjust the target audience according to the journal we selected earlier. Or second, select the target audience first as a guidance to select the appropriate journal.
I would say your manuscript. First of all, what is your audience? So the start is the goal and the aim of your manuscript. When you start writing, you first have to think, is it for an international audience? Then you look at the journal and read the aims and scope of the journal and see what they actually request from authors. What are not only the topics that they publish, but what is the audience of that journal? Is it an international journal, or is it a really very specific journal where narrow studies are published?
Thank you, Judith. We have time for one more question. Judith, if you don't mind, you can go as well on the next slide. Yes.
This slide shows you that there are author tutorials available, which you can freely watch in your own time. Examples are how to peer review, how to avoid paper mills as an author, research integrity course is available, writing in English, how to submit a journal article manuscript with the steps included. I've included the link on top of the slide.
Thank you so much, Judith. And we received the last question from today from Sakline. Very insightful webinar. Thanks for conducting it. If one has two options to go for a publication for Springer Nature or for a journal which has a high acceptance among your field of study.
So the question is, would you select a journal with high acceptance percentage? Is that the question?
Yes.
And
yes.
the other option was?
The Springer Nature.
I'm not sure what the difference is, because there are a lot of Springer Nature journals which have high acceptance rates and low acceptance rates. So it's not really related. There are in general journals at any publisher that have a high acceptance rate. You should try to wonder why a journal has such a high acceptance rate. And yeah, I'm not really sure, because high acceptance rates is not really a criteria for high quality, and it makes me think to go back to the information about how to select a journal. Yeah, I wouldn't use that criteria. I would rather look at the aims and scope of the journal, if it fits, and rather look for if it really fits the scope of the journal, instead of looking for a high acceptance percentage.
Thank you, Judith. If you don't mind, before we wrap up for today, you can leave the slide with your email. So in
Yes.
case students did not write it down, now is the time to mark Judith's email and send her any questions that you might be having that you did not ask today. In the meantime, I would like to thank you all for thoughtful questions that we had today. And many, many thanks to Judith as well for a clear and practical session with us. I think the resources that were mentioned today with Springer Nature tutorials and tools, and as well as the journal guidelines and links, will be shared with attendees after the webinar. So I think you will find it quite useful for your future. A reminder that the webinar recording will be sent out to all of you, but the slides and the presentation slide will be only available for the EAS members. And finally, we're really looking forward to seeing many of you at Aquaculture Europe 2025 in Valencia in 2 weeks. And we would like to thank again to Springer Nature for supporting the EAS Awards and the conference. And thank you again, Judith, for joining us today and for the presenting and for your time and your expertise and for sharing it with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. It was a pleasure presenting. Thank you very much. And any questions, you can use my email, and I will do my best to reply your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.